Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy Show. My name is Hassani, and I am joined by the illustrious Jewel
Good
Smith. Good to see you.
morning.
Good morning,
Good
Jewel.
morning. How are you?
How's everything? I'm doing phenomenal. Listen, guys, we're in part two of our conversation. We started this on yesterday. We're talking about common reconciliation mistakes to avoid. Those of you who have made the commitment to continue in this journey called marriage, there's some obstacles along the way. There's some mountains that you're going to have to climb. But I promise you, if you're committed to the process, you can overcome everything that will attempt to come your way. Every temptation that would tell you to turn around and go in the other direction, every fear, every anxiety. And so we're going to be talking about that today. But before we get started, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let the world know that we are on live. If you haven't downloaded the Couples Academy app, go ahead and do that. It's a great way to stay connected with us. And also, as we've been talking about, the Last Chance Weekend is next weekend. What a perfect time.
Yes,
There's actually a
right
couple
before
couples.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, there's a couple couples who are actually coming, who are celebrating anniversaries, who are celebrating what would typically be Valentine's Day. And I'm like, what a perfect time to get your relationship back on track. What good is candy and roses and, expensive gifts and vacations, and you come back to the same miserable pit that you crawled out of to celebrate a day, and then you go back into a bad space. So we're excited about it. If you're interested, reach out to us. But we're going to dive into this conversation, Joe. We were talking about these consequences yesterday. Had a great conversation. We want to acknowledge everybody in the chat, all of you who are joining in. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for communicating with us and with each other. One of the things that we need to talk about that oftentimes people struggle with, all right, one of these mistakes is becoming, and we're talking about the betrayed spouse in this particular instance, though difficult, okay, don't let paranoia rule the day. Now, paranoia it's an intensified sensitivity where there's a fear or anxiety. There's a belief that something's happening or about to happen to you. In the context of a relationship, there may be a fear that my spouse is going to do it again. And if not do it again, my spouse is going to do something that is going to be compromising and toxic to the relationship. So you're always on edge. You're always thinking the worst. You're always looking around the corner, waiting for something to happen. You're always in anticipation of another horrible situation. And as a result of that, what happens is you build up a wall. You refuse to open up. You refuse to become vulnerable. You refuse to trust. You refuse to forgive. You refuse to give them your heart because your belief is that they will trample on it. They will not protect you. They will not care for you. And so the question is, I always ask, if you feel that way, and if that's the way in which you operate or choose to, from this point forward, operate in a relationship, why are you in the relationship? Why are you staying? To remain trapped in the pain? And so Jewel, you've worked with clients as well. Have you seen this level of paranoia? And I get where it comes from, but to hold on to it and to use it as a weapon can be harmful to your relationship.
Yes, I have seen it. And I've seen it to where it has become extremely detrimental to the betrayed person. We can't say don't go through the motions. We can't say, not to feel those things, but we can say not to stay stuck in those. Because what I'm seeing is they're so stuck on the betrayal and the anxiety and the paranoia, like you said, of them doing it all over again. Now it has caused heart problems. It has caused them, a few of them have had strokes. It has impaired their parenting skills, their job performance, so that paranoia now has gone from what my spouse is going to do, what I'm looking for when I wake up, when I go through the day, what are they doing? What are they not doing? Are they talking to this person, to now rolling over into their own demise, their own health?
Absolutely. And I think that for those who struggle with paranoia, number one, you have to identify this concrete evidence that's really supporting this paranoia. Take
And
another look
normally
at
it's
it.
only in their head.
Huh?
And sometimes it's in their head. It's just they have created that this is what's happening because it happened before. I know they're doing this, and they're it's just a constant reel over and over again.
And that's a good point, because the next thing I was going to say is the question is this suspicion really a symptom of some other problem? And a lot of times, the fear that we have is right here. It is in our heads. Like danger and fear are two different things. Danger
Mhm.
is ever present, it is real. But fear oftentimes is something that we have in our minds when there is no apparent danger. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes we confuse the two, and it allows us to slide into this paranoid state. And it really, what it does is, it causes more of a disconnect between that couple. And so if that's you, if you're struggling with that particular thing, I would highly recommend seek help, get the help that you need to overcome it, because to live in that type of emotional trauma could really be painful, not just to you, but to your marriage and your family as well. Okay, let's go to the next point. Jewel, what are some of the other mistakes that we see people making when they make the decision to reconcile?
Don't involve your children. This is one of the things that we talk about a lot. Parents that involve their children in the betrayals, their affairs, their infidelities, whatever you want to call it. An affair that's a grown-up thing. That is for grown-ups. That conversation is between two adults, not adults and children. Because what happens is, okay, so you know how you're the betrayed person, and there are things going through your head. There's conversations you're having with yourself. You're envisioning these visions as far as your spouse being with their affair partner. Well, don't you think the children are doing that too? They're having these same thoughts, these same conversations with themselves. And who's talking to them? You might seek counseling for you and your spouse, but then the child, you might eventually have counseling for the child, but by then they're so distraught. There's just so much going on. It affects them completely. Now, don't let the child be a mommy or daddy's girl, because if it was the mom that was being betrayed, or even the father, now the child is looking at the other partner and feeling, well, you betrayed mommy or daddy, so you betrayed me. And then you have that disconnect between child and parent. Now that child doesn't trust you. Now that child doesn't believe anything that you say, because now they're taking on that emotion of that a parent that is struggling. And then what happens, it just sets them up for failure as adults, because now that once they start going into their adult world, marriage to them is toxic. There's
Yeah.
lies, there's the betrayals. And then that toxicity now causes them to have alcoholism or turn to drugs. So keep your fair conversations between adults.
That's a good point you make, because when children become adults, oftentimes they will have an apathy or cynicism as it relates to relationships, commitment, and marriage. And that negative outlook really will bleed into how they show up in adult relationships. And the reality is, listen, if you've come from a broken home, if you've come from divorced parents, if you come from a parents who've had an affair, it is not a death sentence. It is not a guarantee that you will be impacted in your marriage, but it's got to be an intentional decision that you have to make, that the buck stops here, that what you experience or what you saw or what you went through in your home growing up is not going to spill into your marriage, that you're going to decide to do something different, that you're going to take those experiences and learn from them, because wisdom is really learning from the experiences of other people. You don't have to go down the same path. And I know that there's so many people that do what dad did, do what mom did, because that's what they saw, as if they had no choice. And we all have a choice in the matter. Once you reach an age of an accountability, you have a decision to make. And so what we're saying is that, listen, protect your children as best you can. But if you have done things that have violated not only the marriage, but compromised the family, and they do know, Let them be lessons that you teach your children. If they don't know, protect your children from your mess because it can be potentially crippling. All right, listen, guys, we're going deeper. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. So stay tuned on the other side. We're going to hit some other things that we do that really compromise the process. And then we're going to read some of your comments. I love the comments. It's been popping recently. We'll get to those in just a second. Stay right there. All right, we're back, guys. You're watching the Couples Academy show. Listen, I'm loving the conversations in the chat. I just want to go to a few of them. Some of them go back and deal with the paranoia, and some of them are actually talking about what you were talking about, Jewel, in terms of the whole idea of how to protect your children. But what I'm hearing is one of the comments says, absolutely, being paranoid is crippling and consuming. What to do when the family is on a location app and the spouse deletes it and tells you, you don't need to know where I am all the time. Yeah, that's a challenge. It's so funny. I was just working with a couple yesterday, and we were talking about the importance of incorporating a GPS tracking system, not just for the offender, but for the betrayed as well. I think that it speaks to the level of transparency that you need to have in a relationship if trust is going to be restored. And until trust is restored, right, there is a sense of paranoia because the assumption is, well, if you're turning it off and you don't want me to know where you are, what are you doing? And people who have nothing to hide nothing. So what, in essence, are you doing?
Yeah, and being, in that instance, as far as paranoia, I think what we're more or less saying is don't allow paranoia to impair you. If you're thinking something's going on and you can still function in some realistic things and you're not angry and bitter and depressed and things like that, Okay, because in that situation, then there's something to think about. If you guys have set up, and he deleted the app or whatever, then I wouldn't say that you're paranoid. I would say you're cautious. But yeah, so you're right. We have an app. My husband and I have an app. And I can honestly tell you, in the beginning of using, FaceTime and what is the other thing? Marco Polo. Now we're so comfortable where if we look at it, we look at it. If we use it, we use it. But it's definitely very good tools, even a 360 to have. Hassani, Facebook user. Um, Her question was, does not telling the children apply to cases where there are children from the affair? In those situations, I would say have a conversation, because what you don't ever want to do is your child to go to, you don't know if that child goes to school with that child, or they in sports with that child. You don't want someone else to tell your child, and children can be very mean, something that important, that doesn't come from mom and dad. But I would definitely make sure that there's another party so that you use the right verbiage.
I mean, I agree with you 1,000%. There was a couple that I worked with, and the husband had an affair, and a child was the result. And the child was about 4 or 5 years old. And so we had to have a conversation with the couple on how they should address the family. And so we brought all the family members together, and they made the announcement to the family, because certain things you just can't hide from, because to your point, you never know when the information will come out. And it will be better to come out from the actual person who was involved in the affair than to come out through some other means. And I think that truth can be damaging or more damaging based upon how it is received. When it comes from an affair partner, when it comes anonymously, when it comes like in complete shock, and you see some child holding hands with your father, like what? And so I think that out of respect for the family, you have to be sensitive to what you present, when you present, how you present, and why you present. And in this case, absolutely, you have to have that conversation. And so hopefully this conversation is helpful. There's been some other comments here about how paranoia is justified because of one's horrible behavior. And absolutely, your anger could be justified. Your sadness is justified. Your paranoia is justified because it comes from somewhere. And so for us to say, oh, don't worry about it, just get over it, don't be paranoid. No, it's not that simple. What we're saying is to live in it, to use it as almost like a defense mechanism and as a weapon and as a form of protection. That's when it becomes dangerous, and it can ultimately compromise your relationship. All right, we're going to go to the next one. We're talking about the mistakes that people make. One of the other challenges is that when people emotionally unleash on their spouse. Now, guys, I'm having trouble on my end with the technology, so I don't know if you see me. Jewel, can you hear me and see me?
You are fading in and out. You're freezing, and then your voice goes in and out. So you might be talking, but I can't hear you.
Okay. So we're having challenges, guys, and I'm going to make this last point, and we're going to see where it goes from here. But, the emotional unleashing on your spouse is also very problematic in your relationship, because obviously when you first discover a betrayal, during the discovery phase, it is the most emotionally volatile. So usually that's when the tears flow. That's when the fists swing. That's when the tires get slashed. That's when the windows get broken. If you go to that extent, it becomes it almost becomes a war zone in that household. And so we get that that's the initial response, but some people choose to use that as their means of dealing with their spouse, because you hurt me. Oh, okay, that's what you're going to do. I'm going to make sure that you feel the wrath of what you've done to me. It kind of makes me think about how people operate in the street. Like, okay, if you kill my dog, I'm killing your whole family, right? It's a level of revenge on such a high level that it becomes destructive for everybody. And so if you think that the only one who's being hurt and harmed is the one that you're unleashing the emotions on, you're sadly mistaken, because it does just as much hurt and pain and harm to you as the one who's unleashing it as it is on the person you're unleashing it to. So it's very toxic, and it can lead to the deterioration of that relationship. And so once again, you got a question. If you decided to reconcile, why do you choose to remain in this space? Why do you choose to remain in a toxic environment that will never commitment to being married than to restoring the actual relationship? What are your thoughts, Drew?
Well, I missed almost the last tail part of what you said because you completely froze out. But as far as the emotional attack, yes, it is very detrimental, because when you're in your feelings, that's how you function. But when you're out of your feelings, now you're the one who has to clean up that mess. And I don't mean that, literally. I mean, you've tore up your home. You have you've decredited your spouse to where now they may lose their jobs, which at that point you don't care. So there goes your finances. Their credibility is out the window. So everything that you're doing, you have to. And then when words, once you say something, you can't take that pain back. Not that they don't deserve it at that point in time, but you still have to be careful, because what comes out of your mouth, like this, the Bible says, excuse me, life or death is in the power of the tongue. So you have to be careful. Hassani, you are like really, even the photo is going in and out.
All right, guys, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to continue like that, especially when you're given powerful information. So we hope that you heard something here today that was somewhat helpful. We'll continue the conversation on tomorrow. So until then, see you, have a conversation with your spouse, and see you tomorrow. Friday is relationship Q&A. You can ask the experts anything you want. So we'll see you in the morning. Take care.